Good morning. It's Monday, July 26, 2021, and this is DC Signal to Noise. I'm Davis Michelson from AgriTalk, in for the vacationing, the sojourning Chip Flory. He'll be back next week, but I'm here with Jim Wiesmeyer because there's just too much going on to take a week off. We don't dare. Jim, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. And I think Chip sent me a picture of Alcatraz over the weekend. At least it looked like Alcatraz. Hopefully he wasn't embodied there. Just a quick note, Davis Michelson, I go way back with his family because his father, Ron, worked at Pro Farmer for many years and we had a great time. And I can't wait because Ron's a good news and audio person, and we're gonna hit it. And remember to ask any questions and we'll try to get to them.
That's right. That's right. Well, Jim, July, it's on its way out already. Where does the time go? On Capitol Hill, both chambers looking forward to an August recess. It's thought maybe that hard break might inspire some progress, but we got to ask on what? Where does the progress come from, if it does come from? Infrastructure, meatpacking issues, WHIP plus, fiscal 22 spending, a lot on the table set for lawmakers. But one has to wonder if there's risk of maybe rushing some of these measures through ahead of the August recess. And that might mean items may not be thoroughly or properly resolved. We can get into some of these thoughts here, but would you just kind of run down last week for us? What was on your mind last week? And then we'll move forward into what's coming up this week.
Sure. Well, Rush and Congress never go together. So I don't think we have any problem of worrying that Congress is going too fast, because even if they get some agreements this week, Ron, we'll still have some lingering issues between the time it gets from the Senate to the House. And last week, we'll see a continuation this week of the biggest issue, at least in this town, and it's the part 1 and 2 of the infrastructure measures. Part 1 is the total of $1.2 trillion, physical, more traditional infrastructure, really $579 billion in new funding that wasn't going to be, spent. And then the huge $3.5 trillion social or human infrastructure bill that will almost 100% be part of a coming reconciliation bill, because it'll be a go it alone Democrat bill, because I don't think any Republican is going to vote for it. That's where we're at. And even late last week, we were supposed to have a vote on the physical infrastructure last week, but the Republicans called timeout and said, look, we don't have text. We still don't have text, by the way. It should come late this afternoon based on the latest information I have. And they didn't have the final pay-fors resolved. And again, as we speak, those are still ongoing. There's a last-minute policy glitch relative to transit type programs, kind of the percentage ratio, but that's more inside the beltway sort of stuff. I really think that they'll iron out the differences, because the political will is there from both parties, and that's unusual, to get physical infrastructure done so they can go home for a long vacation. And there's nothing like, for Congress, seeing a summer vacation to finally get things done, and I think we're going to see it. It's always a wild card, that a showboat can happen, that can delay it. But I think we're in the progress of seeing it done this week.
Jim, can we talk about this idea of details missing from the physical infrastructure and Republicans pushing back against that? Maybe I'm being naive about how things work in Washington, but is there a level of expectation that, hey, let's just go ahead and push this through. Let's get the funding figured out. Let's get this measure moved through, and then we'll fill in the details. Is that what we're to expect?
A lot of times that's ironically the way it is, because this town works. If you provide too much information too soon, then the proponents and opponents come out of the woodwork. So I understand that up to a degree, but when you're spending as much money, even at this town is doing, you ought to have some language to look at. But they've done it before, and they'll do it again. And I've got a filter once we have the language in a PDF document for keywords that'll pop up some language, and I know other people do as well. So I think for transparency, we really need the legislative text and also the pay-fors to see how much phony pay-fors there are going, because that could affect a number of Republican votes. I think they have at least 11 Republican votes, and that's going to be enough to get it through. But I think those are two critical things still. The timing of it, yeah, it's about time to release those things.
You mentioned some key words that you use to search a text quickly through the miracle of modern technology. What are some of those key words?
Well, farmer, agriculture, biofuel, in case you got to always look for wild card issues in any legislation. There's a phrase I always look for, and I put it in quotes to make sure every word is in there: such sums as necessary. And that's important. For an example, the WIP Plus program. It's always had a funding problem because it goes through annual appropriations. But if you put in the phrase, such sums as necessary, that's open-ended. It's whatever it takes. Now, it's scored differently by the Congressional Budget Office, but some of those things are what I look for. So, some of the issues that can flare up if it's embodied in a must-pass legislation. That's where you can get some surprises.
Boy, and the devil is really in the details in a lot of what we're seeing, especially coming out of the House. There have been accusations that, well, this is just a Green New Deal repackaged, and a lot of fine print and executive orders that have come out of the Oval Office itself, too. Is this what's making GOP members so gun shy?
Well, yes, and that's the part two part. The physical infrastructure, I think the vast majority of Republicans should favor it, but they're afraid that if whatever doesn't get in this first bill, the Democrats will just roll everything else, including the Green New Deal, into the human infrastructure bill, which is really budget reconciliation, that they'll eventually, I think, have the 50 Democratic votes they need with Kamala Harris breaking the tie. And that's what has a number of less moderate Republicans nervous, because they think that this is could be a test for them, that they be like a Trojan horse, if you will, that they give. And the Wall Street Journal has, I think, an interesting editorial or commentary item today. What are the Republicans getting in even the physical infrastructure bill? Usually when you have a bipartisan bill, you get something for it. And at least from the Journal's more conservative stance, they don't see the Republicans getting much out of this even human infrastructure bill. I'm sorry, on the physical infrastructure bill.
Yep, yes. Yep. Okay, so what are our chances that we'll still be talking about, well, more details are still awaited and really nothing has happened? What are the chances we get to Friday this week and we're still saying the same song?
Well, by the end of next week, we'll know for sure, I think. Okay. So I'm not going to rule out this thing going into next week yet. But I'll tell you again, history tells me that they want to go home. They're like most of us. They want to get back into either their districts or their states. So the will is there, but whenever you have this hang up of to the degree that we're seeing in the pay-fors, then it can lead to some delays, So, but I think by the end of next week, that means they're cutting into their vacation, and they don't like that. But
right,
I'm not going to rule it out.
Sure. You mentioned, almost as a bit of a side note, WIP Plus. Can you bring us up to speed on WIP Plus?
Yes, the House Ag Committee this week is going to mark up a bill that has WIP Plus for 2020 and 2021 ag disasters. You remember the derecho last year? It didn't qualify because it ended with 2019 on the latest WIP Plus, but embodied in that legislative markup will be an attempt by lawmakers to make WIP Plus less complex and more timely in implementation. And that's if you know anything about WIP Plus, it's the worst of programs because it'll make your eyes glaze over, just the complexity of implementing it. So let's hope they succeed. But I think, again, the support is there for, WIP Plus for 2020 and 2021, crops. So let's hope the program's reformed. We'll know the initial indication sometime this week out of the House Ag Committee. And I think we've got Davis stopped. So I'll continue to see if Davis comes on. I will also tell you what I worked on last week and the week before that will come out, I think, sometime today, a special report that I haven't worked on something like this in my entire over 45-year career, that I've taken the luxury of time to do interviews with farmers, grain industry people, USDA officials, past and present. And the topic is how to improve USDA estimates and forecast. And it needed an in-depth look. And that last count, my paper, now I'm going to call it, I won't call it an article, is 17 pages, and I air out the issues. So look forward to that one, because I think it's the beginning of the discussion, not the end, of some of the sensitive issues, but worthwhile issues to discuss on both the National Agricultural Statistics Service and USDA's World Outlook Board. So I'm really anxious. It's written basically. The last interview that I did was with Seth Meyer, USDA's chief economist. I folded his comments into the final product, which again, hopefully will come out today. That was the key things looking back at last week. And as far as this week, we have the rollovers of the infrastructure bill, but we also have a federal, FOMC meeting, Federal Open Market Committee meeting for 2 days, but Wednesday is the key day, and that's when the Fed chairman has his press conferences, Jerome Powell. And the market's going to be very attuned to that, whether or not that we're going to have any nuance in if they're going to taper some of the purchases of the securities markets, because the Fed has said they want to end their tapering before they even begin to think about raising interest rates. And the financial traders go over every word in the FOMC statement, and then they parse also Powell's every word to see if there's any changes in attitude. And we'll also see that relative to their thoughts on inflation, whether or not they keep saying it's transitory. And I think we have Davis back.
Indeed. I heard you say that word transitory. That's been a word that's been thrown around an awful lot here. And I get it. We're coming off of a deep dive in the economy. It's natural that we should see a buildup here, and it should logically level off. We can't keep going out and eating out at the pace that we are. People are excited to get out and
Yes.
travel and stuff, and that really makes the economy hum along. So I kind of understand the transitory rhetoric that's been thrown around, Jim.
Yes. And Vilsack, USDA Secretary, Vilsack said on Bloomberg Television, I think it was Friday, that he thinks this food price run up will also level out as well. So I think he's getting into the mix, and he's probably right, there to a degree.
All right. So can we take that as a suggestion of a commodity market top here?
I don't, ag secretaries over the years. I remember Earl Butz used to comment on price situations and other ag secretaries. And whenever they got into price, I don't think Vilsack's saying that. He's just looking at the product of agriculture as opposed to the underlying, commodities therein. And overall, I think he's going to be right. By the end of the year, we should have a settling down of the pace of the increases. Because when you walk the aisles of your supermarket, and you go past the meat case, chicken, here I come, and also pork. But I love beef, but boy, it is getting pretty high. So, sure. And mentioning meat, Davis, we're going to have 2 hearings this week.
That's right.
On the meat processing industry, and we're going to have Senator Chuck Grassley on AgriTalk this morning, and I know, we're going to be on with him, and the Senate Judiciary Committee is one of those hearings, and where are we going to go with that, things like that. We're going to ask a person who knows and has been a proponent of some of the things relative to what he and some others are saying is way too heavily, concentration in the meat processing industry. But we're going to have 2 hearings this week on that.
Recently, it seems like there's been a significant development among all stripes of cattle producers in which they have seemed to be a little bit more willing to put aside small philosophical differences, differences of opinion in order to pose a more unified front as an industry. Is this what you're seeing as well? And is this maybe the time, after how many years, how many decades of struggling to get the meatpacking industry sorted out and approved by the producer side, do we make progress with a unified front from the cattlemen?
At least the will is there. You're absolutely correct. And now that I'm going out and speaking live, you get to talk to producers. And I mentioned a week or so ago when I was at a very good, Virginia cattlemen's meeting, it gave me a chance to work the hall, and they had hundreds of, cattle people there. And I asked them, and almost all said that they liked the direction where Vilsack and the Biden administration was going relative to increasing meat processing capacity, because in a number of areas of the country, it's really pretty tight as far as who they can sell to. So to a producer, I had, pretty good applauding as far as that, concept. And recall, for facts here, Vilsack announced at least, I think, $650 million on this topic, $500 million for medium-sized to increase meat processing. It's not going to happen overnight, and $150 million for the small to very small locker plants, etc. That's getting pretty good reviews wherever I go.
Good. Let's move on to some personnel. We've got the Senate Ag Committee. They've got a vote tonight, Monday evening, on the nomination of Jen Moffitt to be USDA's Undersecretary for Marketing Regulatory Programs. What do we know about Ms. Moffitt?
Well, and she's going to have to help decide on some of the issues that we just talked about. From the marketing side and the regulatory side, I don't think she should have any trouble getting approved. We're going to also see Bonnie, the trade, the energy, person, climate change, at least have a nomination hearing on that one. But the angle I want to put on this is we're past now 6 months into the Biden administration. This is they're pretty late now in getting some of these people over at USDA. It's not like they haven't been doing some things, behind the scenes. They usually do. So they can hit the ground, running on that one. But I don't see any problems in the Senate accepting, these 2 nominations.
Now, I left you for just a moment unwillingly, and I missed what you were talking about, but you were talking about that transitory inflation while you were in there. But there's a whole lot of economic data that's coming out. Have you touched on any of that yet?
Well, we're going to see the inflation. I said, I mentioned whether or not Jerome Powell will nuance any shift that the market can sense on that. The U.S. economy is going pretty good, but now you're having some flare-ups relative to the Delta variant. And I know where I used to live in the St. Louis area, I've got a number of my family up in arms that their kids are going to have to wear a mask in St. Louis County in their school system, and they don't like that whatsoever. And whether or not a number of businesses will have to retrench again, so that's got a lot of question marks in there. I don't think we're going to have near the retrenchment that we saw in the early days. Let's hope not of the pandemic, but the sensitivity of the issue of mask, and especially those people who got both vaccine shots. I mean, it just sends the wrong signal if you have to wear a mask when you've had both vaccine shots. So. That's going to get into the overall business structure as well. Los Angeles is back to the mask, even if you've had the vaccine, as I mentioned, St. Louis County.
You mentioned the Fed. I wonder if you would care to speculate. It's a little early maybe yet as to whether or not Fed Chair Jerome Powell gets to keep his job in February.
I think that he will, but the reason is I really think he's gone almost too far in linking with the White House. Now, to be fair, he would not agree with that assessment whatsoever. I don't care. They've shaded a little closer than any Fed that I've seen in a long time, and that can get you in trouble. He's taking a risk here, but now some initial information is coming out that maybe he'll be more comfortable in continuing to say inflation is, transitory. But I don't think that they could get another person that's been more in sync with them because of his testimony in the Hill when they had pending, pandemic aid. He more than signaled support for that. So I don't know what you would get with another person. It could tie into the race of the person that I've been told, if that's the case. But I think overall, he's got intellectual capacity. He is a good communicator. He can think on his feet. Quite again, articulate. So I would still say that he's earned that extension.
It seems like all eyes are on the rate, the level of bond purchases that the Fed is making right now as an indicator of when inflation rates will rise. Is he walking that line with his job at stake in mind, or is there something else at play here?
No, I think he's got the history that I think you do your best job you possibly can. I think that's where most Fed chairmen are, and ladies, and with Janet Yellen. But the fear I think he has internally is he doesn't want the Fed to make a policy mistake like Japan did several decades ago, in which they started raising interest rates and then it came back to haunt them. And then they went into a 20 to 30 year funk on basically declining prices. Now, I'm not predicting that for the U.S., but you don't want to make a policy move ahead of time. But it's dicey because if they wait too long, then inflation and interest rates are going to have to rise faster and further than anyone realizes. So that's called a conundrum, as we say. So he's on a high wire there. But I personally think that they should start really tapering their purchases in the real estate, securities. It's just we've got such a hot land and home market here right now that I know wherever I go, but Phoenix, there's a big story in the Journal how that market has come back in gangbusters in my area. I think I mentioned before, the person across the street sold their house $65,000 over asking price. That's a hot market. And they're adding to this, I think, by purchasing securities in the real estate area.
Well, and we're going to run out of time quickly here, but before we do, I do want to get back and touch on the human infrastructure element of the infrastructure bill. And it's a ways off yet, and maybe you can help us estimate a timeline as to when we might at least begin to see this debated in full. But
in the full, I'll answer that right away. The Senate wants to do it either this week or next week before they leave.
Okay.
But the House is the key. And it will likely take until the fall, late summer, early fall, as part of the budget reconciliation, Davis. And really that reconciliation bill, I don't think there's any other way to say it. It's a fundamental shift in the scope and direction of this country. I mean, and I'm being unbiased here. When you look at the eventual language, it's the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party who really wrote that bill.
All right. We spoke with Vince Malanga on AgriTalk about a week and a half ago. And what he was presenting, as if I understood it correctly, because Malanga is quite the thinker. I appreciate his thoughts very much. Almost what they're attempting is addition by subtraction. They're trying to keep the economy chugging, to spur economic activity while at the same time stifling inflation. And he went straight to the labor participation rate. And it all goes back to labor participation as far as he's concerned. And those who have put together this human infrastructure bill seem to want to, like I said, spur economic growth while at the same time stifling inflation. Can they get it done? Have I got my head around this?
You do. And I just wish they had this theory around when I was growing up, when I got paid by my parents, because then I could have said, well, it doesn't matter what you paid. Just give me whatever I want. That's basically saying this town is doing this. I think there's going to be a price to pay. This is Europe, by the way. This is how Europe operates. Okay. It's just a different thing to watch, but it was not economics 101 that I learned in college. So, this is an experiment that may not end, very well at all. And we're seeing now the politics once again of raising the debt limit. The Republicans are saying, wait a minute, which I don't think is the right approach. And that also will probably be handled in the budget reconciliation, that they'll do something to make sure that we raise our neuter the concern about the debt limit.
Jim, tick-tock, here goes the clock. I'm going to give you just a few seconds here for your final closing thoughts for us this morning, please.
One, if we can't get an agreement on the physical infrastructure, part one in the Senate, then you can kiss this Congress goodbye until the 2022 elections. If we do get the agreement, then all eyes will be on Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who says she wants the second part approved in the Senate before she'll even take up the physical infrastructure bill. And that's when you're having what I said before, the fundamental changes in the scope and direction of this country.
All right. Outstanding. Jim Wiesemeyer. Have a great day, buddy. I'll see you a little later on AgriTalk.
Absolutely. Senator Chuck Grassley, get ready.
Thanks for tuning in to Signal to Noise, everyone. I'm Davis Michelson in for Chip Flory. Have a great day.